Today's project, we're going to learn how to make a wire-wrapped pendant. Stay tuned. Hello everybody, my name is Jim McIntosh and I'm going to show you today how to make a wire wrap pendant. Now I know, this was probably the first thing you ever learned. Everybody does wire wrap pendants. I do mine a little bit differently. Over the years of teaching this in various classes and bead stores all over the place, I've come up with ways to make this job a whole lot easier. Like, how do you know how much wire you need? Where am I going to lay everything out? How do I do that? How many wires do I need? How can I make this job easier? That's what we're going to talk about today. So during the project, I'm going to show you ways I do it, but I'm also going to show you ways on how to make this a very, very, very secure piece so that when you sell it, years down the road, when somebody sees you again at another art show when they've bought from you, they'll be able to show you a piece that they've been wearing for years and is still holding up really well for them. I want you to be able to make a secure piece. So look down in the description below. You'll find all of the tools and the materials to make this project. There aren't a lot. There's this pretty basic thing we're going to do. And once you know what you're going to need, let's wander over to the bench and we're going to go ahead and get started making this piece, okay? Here we go. So before we get started, I thought I would show you a little bit about what we're going to be making. So this is a piece, this is in copper. This is what we're going to be making. This is a 25 by 18 millimeter stone. And notice a few things about it. The stone is actually in there really securely, even though it looks as if it's not. These are just kind of pushed over the edges of the stone. But I want you to notice this aspect of it as well. This is a little curl that we add to it that makes this bail really super strong. Okay, so this is a small one, and this is the size we're going to be making. But let me show you the same example, but in a much larger piece. So this is a piece of Larimar. This is a piece I did in silver. It's got more strands to it. This one was actually made with 6 strands of wire because of how thick the stone is. This is considerably thicker than this one is. So this one has 4 strands on it. This one has 6 strands on it. And it's made the very same way. Notice the curl. Notice how the bail is made. I make all my bails nice and big so that any chain or slide can go through it. And let's show you just how this is a very, very sturdy and strong piece. I'm pulling on this and the bail does not slip out. So that's something important, because when you make a piece and you sell it or give it away to a friend or a relative, you want to make sure that the piece is going to last for a very, very long time. And making some of these curves across the stone will help to make sure you have a nice secure piece. So there's that one. And let me show you one more example. Now this is a very similar piece. This is a nice big orthoceras. My wife made this one, and she also made this copper one as well. But it has very much the same characteristics. She does her curl in the back just a little bit different than I do, but it's still just as strong. See, we're pulling on it, nothing's coming loose. It's still very strong. She also used multiple strands of wire, more than 4. But now notice the bottom here. She made a center, instead of making a center wrap like as in this one. See, this one's centered at the bottom. This one is offset just on the side. So this is another design element that you can put in. Then she added another wrap here on the side because the stone is so long that it really does kind of need a little bit of extra support. So these are examples of what we're going to be making. So if you can make this one, you can make this one and this one. And I'll show you how to do that. It's really simple how to do it. I'll show you how to measure the stone. I'll show you how many wires you'll need. I'll show you everything you need to be able to adapt this project to make these other pieces, okay? So let's get into the materials that we'll need for this particular piece. So let's take a look at the materials we'll need for this. First of all, we're going to need a cabochon. This is a 25 by 18 millimeter cabochon, and all of the measurements that we're going to be doing for this, all of the wire measurements, will be based on this particular size stone, but I will show you how to adjust that. Now, if you're not familiar with a cabochon is simply just a cut of stone. It's almost dropped there. A cabochon's characteristics are it usually has some sort of a domed top. It'll have a flat back. So if you look here, the back portion of this is flat. And this is what is called a calibrated cabochon. Calibrated just means that it fits a particular size of dimensions. It's an oval stone. It's usually done in certain increments. Okay, so you need a cabochon. You will also need some square wire. Now, I am using, and you can tell I buy all of my wire from Rio Grande. I'm using 22 gauge square wire, and it's dead soft. Why do I use dead soft? A lot of people use half hard wire, and that's fine. The problem is that it really is difficult to work with. Half hard wire, it's very stiff and it will hurt your fingertips after a while. So I recommend dead soft wire so that it's much easier to manipulate the wire. And as we're working with it, you'll see just how easy it is. I use 22 gauge. You can use 21 gauge. You can even use 20 gauge. But someplace in around that area between, say, 20 and 22 gauge wire will give you enough wire as well as strength to hold the stone in. You'll also need some half round wire. I use half round because half round wire will sit flat on the stone, but it gives you a nice dome on the outside of it, that it gives it a very nice, elegant appearance of the wrap. So I use this. This is 22 gauge. It's half round wire. This is half hard wire. Now, when it comes to half round wire, because of how thin it is to use, it really is easier to work with. So half hard doesn't make a difference in this case when using it, because you'll still be able to manipulate the wire, and plus it'll give you some good strength in the wire. And we're not going to really do a whole lot of manipulating that wire. We're just going to be wrapping that wire. Okay? And half round wire, it has a flat side and a curved side. Now, how do you know which is which? Well, when it comes off of the spool, when it's put on the spool, or when it's put into a coil, you can buy it in a coil as well, the inside part, the curved part, notice how it has that natural curve because of being on there. That curved part is the flat side of the wire. The outside of the curve is the rounded or domed side of the wire. Keep that in mind, because when we're wrapping, we want to make sure we wrap with the flat side against the wire bundle, and we'll go into that in just a minute. So that's the materials that we'll need. Let's move on to the tools that we'll need. Okay, let's take a look at the tools we'll need. Now we'll start with our cutters. These are wire cutters. These are flush cutters. You need something, obviously, to cut the wire away from the spool. Flat nose pliers. Definitely will be using these quite a bit throughout, and these are just a small pair that I use. Also, you might need chain nose. I'm not saying you will, but we might need chain nose pliers for this project. Notice they've got a nice tip to them, so chain nose are good. To mark the wire bundle, get a nice fine tip permanent marker. The reason why we use a permanent marker is so that it'll last longer on the wire. Over time, your fingertips will, as you're manipulating the wire, will kind of rub that off. So this will keep the marks on there a little bit longer. And notice it is a fine tip permanent marker. You'll need something also to measure your wire. Now we're going to be using a tape measure in this, whatever you can use to measure that. Okay. Here's your best friend right here, painter's tape. I will show you how to do this. Many, many, many wire artists learn to do this without tape, and it causes so many frustrations. I'm going to show you how you can make life easy as you're doing this by just using something as simple as painter's tape. I use painter's tape because it really doesn't leave a residue on the wire as when you apply it to the wire. And that's something we want because we don't want to have that residue on there. And I have scissors, obviously. I'm really weird about my tape, so I like to cut my tape. It drives me crazy when somebody rips a piece off for me. Now this is an old paring knife. You can see how jagged the tip is. I've been using this paring knife for years, but I use this sometimes to separate my wires, and you can see how used it's been. This poor thing has been just beat up over the years. So these are just the tools we'll need to do the project. So we know the materials and we know the tools we're going to need. Let's get on to the project. Here we go. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out how much wire we're going to need for our project. And that means measuring the circumference of our stone. And we're also going to do one other thing. As we're measuring the circumference of our stone, we're also going to lay out where we're going to put our wraps. So we need our scissors and we need some tape. Now we need about, depending on the size of your stone, this is a small one, probably only need about 2 inches, 3 inches of tape. So I cut off a 3-inch piece of this tape. And now I'm going to cut a sliver off of this tape bundle. So we're going to cut just the edge off. Keep this handy because we're going to be using it. So I usually just stick it to my workstation here, my workbench, so I can get to it quickly. So let's grab the sliver of this, and this is a solid black stone, so that I can determine which is up. It doesn't make much of a difference, but if you've got a stone with a pattern on it, or it's got a certain shape to it, you're going to want to determine which is which. So notice this one, obviously this has got a wider top here of the cabochon, and this comes to a point. So when she made this, she made sure, plus the pattern also goes a certain way. So this became the top of the stone and this is the bottom. So determine which is which. And I want you to take the end of this tape and I want you to put it at the very top. Now, this doesn't have to be perfect. It's just got to be pretty close to the top of the stone. And I want you to put the tape all the way around the outside of the stone, like that, so that they both meet up at the top. And when they do meet and where they overlap, I want you to just take your scissors and cut it off. That's all you need to do. So now we've got the circumference of our stone. So this is the top where the two pieces come together. I want you to go to the bottom of the stone. Let's kind of fix this a little bit. I got this a little off a little bit. It's not going to stick right, so let's do that. There we go. Okay. So now we're going to take our permanent marker and opposite the top, which we call the bottom of the stone, I want you to make a straight line pretty close to the bottom of the stone. So you see that? That shows us the center or the bottom of the stone. Now from here, we're going to mark out our bottom wrap area. So we're going to put a mark here to the right, and we're going to want to kind of go evenly on the other side, pretty close to even on that. So this is the bottom wrap of the stone. So let me show you what I mean. Here is what we've done. We have marked out this bottom wrap. Okay. Now flip the stone over, and at the top, I want you to do very similar. But instead of making a middle line, we're just going to make a line here to the right where the tape meets, and to the left where the tape meets. So those are pretty close to even as well. Now, this top part doesn't make much of a difference. It just is a guide for us to figure out where we're going to be putting our wraps. So let's set this aside. We'll take the tape off of the stone. This tells us how much tape, or excuse me, how much wire we're going to need. So take this, and I want you to stick it to your work surface. So this is what we have on our work surface. Let's kind of center this just a little bit. There we go. Okay, so you've got the center area. This is where the center wrap is going to go, and then these are where the top wraps are going to go. So to figure out how much wire we're going to need, we're going to measure this. So this is about, it should be about it's just over 2.5 inches. It looks like it's about 2 3/4 inches. So to figure out how much wire we're going to need, we're going to double that. So 2 3/4 inches equals 5.5 inches. That will get us around the outside of the stone. To make the bail, to give us enough wire to do all this work up here at the top, we're going to need a little bit more. So we're going to add 2 more inches to this. So that would bring us to 7.5 inches. So each strand, each one of these wires will be 7.5 inches long. So let's go ahead and we'll measure out our wire, and we'll start cutting it. Okay, so we have our square wire. We're going to measure out 4 strands, and 4 strands will do this for us, because we're going to want 1 strand to go over the top of the stone on both sides. We're going to want 1 to cover the back like this, and then we'll want a couple of wires to hold in the sides of this. So you need at least 1 or 2. Since this is a larger stone, we're probably going to need, I'd say, 2. So we're going to cut 4 strands of wire at 7.5 inches each. So measure out your 7.5. And using your wire cutters, I want you to cut each one. I'm dropping things all over the place. Look at me go. There we go. So there's 1. And here is 2. Our 3rd one. And the 4th wire there. Now, let's talk about what determines how many strands we'll need. We showed this example here, how thick this stone is. I could actually have added probably 1 or 2 more strands to this, because you see how much of this side of this is showing. This was a very, very high domed piece of stone, this Larimar was. So that's really what determines it. If you have a very thick stone like this, you're going to want to use more than 4 strands. Maybe 6, 7, even 8 strands of wire, depending on how thick the stone is. So think about that as you're doing this. Now this black onyx, it's not that thick, it's not that high. I think, let's see, I've got, it's approximately, it looks like it's 5 millimeters high. So that's not very thick for this. So 4 strands of wire will work perfectly. So take each strand, and we want to straighten these out. And you want to straighten them out so that they're relatively straight. Now, I personally do this with my fingertips. Now, this is dead soft wire, so notice it straightens out pretty well. Now, as I've got a curve in it, so we're going to take that out. We're going to just put a little back pressure on that curve, and there it'll straighten it out. Now, we just want it relatively straight. It doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Don't go crazy and think you've got to make each one of these strands perfectly straight. Some people like to use a cloth of some sort, whether it's a sunshine cloth, which is a cleaning cloth that you can get from Rio Grande, or perhaps it's just a cloth you use on your workbench. Whatever you've got, if that's what you want to use, it protects your fingers. Some people have gotten cut by doing this. I have not had any problems in over 15 years doing this. I've poked myself a couple of times with wire ends, but never have I cut my fingers from straightening my wires out. So here we go, last one. And that's relatively straight. So our wires are now straightened out. So we're going to get them bunched up together. And once we do that, we're going to tape the wire bundle together. This will make it so that we can work with the wire. I'm cutting my tape right now. That's why I wasn't in the shot there. So take your 4 wires that you've got, and I want you to put them all together so they meet at one end. And you want them squared. So make sure that they are sitting tightly next to one another like this, and that one of them is not on edge. Having a wire on edge will cause the whole wire bundle to be a mess. So now that you've got your wires held together, and I'm not holding them very tightly, I'm going to take a small piece of that tape. Remember the tape we cut the sliver of tape out of earlier? Well, I'm cut just a little narrow piece of that, and I'm going to set it across all 4 wires like that. And then I'm going to take one end and I'm going to bring it around to the other side, and I'm going to tape them together like a little flag. See, so now if I hold the flag, see, everything's held together. See, no problems. So then start at the flag, and I want you to straighten your wires again so that they're all kind of moving close to each other. Now, some of the heat from your fingertips and the friction of drawing these between your fingers will help to smooth these wires together. See, so notice how they're splitting apart here? Well, we're going to just run your finger up the bundle till they come to the other side. Now they're all together. And then we're going to take another piece of tape, and we're going to make another flag at the other end, like that. Now you've got a wire bundle that you can work with in order to wrap almost hands-free to a degree, because these pieces of tape, and I say use this tape whenever you possibly can to hold your wires together, just so you can make sense of where things are. So we've got our wire bundle. We now need to transfer these marks that are on the tape to this wire bundle so that we know where we're going to wrap, and we'll do that right now. So what we now need to do is we need to transfer these marks that we made on this tape to our wire bundle. And we'll have to find the center of our wire bundle. And the center of this would be 3 3/4 inches. So let's make that mark with a marker here, 3 3/4 on the wire bundle, which would be approximately right here. You want to make sure that it's on there pretty good, which mine isn't. I hope my marker, there we go. So there's 3 3/4. And if you recall, we made our first line as the center line as we were marking out the tape while it was on the cabochon. So that's the center. So you just line your center with the wire bundle with the center on the tape, and then just transfer your marks over. So I'll transfer this mark, and I'll transfer this mark, And see, I'll transfer this mark, whoops, that mark, and I'll throw the end of the tape in there as well. And then we'll do this other end here. We will mark that, and I'll mark the end also. So now you've got 3 sections on here of where you're going to make wire wraps at. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and we'll make our first wire wraps. So now that we've got all of our marks on our wire bundle, we're going to make our first wraps. So what I want you to do, let's trim off this end because it's kind of goofy. We're going to cut about a 7-inch piece, 8-inch piece of the half round wire. Now remember I said that half round, when it comes off the spool, has this curve to it. The outside of the curve is the round side. The inside of the curve is the flat side. When you're done wrapping and you cut off your excess wire, I always kind of leave a curl in it. I make a curl in it so I know which is the inside and which is the outside of the wire. When you wrap, you'll notice that you've done the wrong side, because the rounded side has a nice shiny, it reflects the light differently than the flat side does. So I want you to take in between your fingers here, I want you to hold it with the flat side facing you. Okay, and then about an inch away from the tip, I want you to hold it with your flat nose pliers. Now take the long end, and I'm going to push it up and over and to the right. There's my small end, to the right of this, and I notice it kind of makes a little check mark. Having it offset like this allows you to make your first wrap and you continue wrapping. Now, people who are left-handed, they do this opposite. So think about that, left-handed people, because I'm showing you, I'm right-handed, so I'm showing you how I do it right-handed. Yours is going to be a little bit different. I wrap from left to right. Left-handed people wrap from right to left usually. So keep that in mind as well. So now take your wire bundle. Now notice I've got the check mark right up here. So I got the check mark facing away from me. And I'm going to put it on my wire bundle. And I'm going to put it right here on the left mark, because that's where I'm going to start wrapping. So now I hold it there and I put a little pressure on there, and then I grab my flat nose and I hold it there so that it's offset. So hopefully you can see that the wires, I'm holding it flat now. The tab is to the left, the long wire is to the right. Grab the long wire, bring it up and over your wire bundle and over the tool. I'm still holding it. And then with your thumb and your index finger, I want you to pinch and remove the pliers. That will make your first wrap. Okay, so then all it is I use this little tab here as a finger hold. So I hold it kind of near the wire bundle. I grab the long end and I continue to do the wrap around the wire bundle. Now, hold some pressure here. I've got a bit of pressure that I'm holding onto this, but not so much pressure that it causes the wire bundle to bunch up. Every few wraps, I want you to take your flat nose and I want you to squeeze it flat. I usually do it about every 4 or 5. That will set this wrap against the wire bundle nice and neatly so that it gives it some strength so it won't move so much, but it also keeps everything nice and in order. So we're simply just going to do that. Now I can go pretty quickly, so we're just going around and we're just adding more and more of these wraps to our center wrap. Okay, now let me show you a little trick. Sometimes I've had people in class where they've really had a heavy hand with this. It takes a little bit of practice to kind of get used to it. So let me show you just a little tip I've kind of developed over the years of how to make it so that those wraps don't bunch up on the wire bundle as you're wrapping them. So I am going to take now, I cut a couple more of these little tabs, and on your wire, outside of where you're going to wrap, I want you to just take the flag, make another flag. So you put a piece of tape there, and I'm going to grab another one, and I'm going to put another one right here. So this is the other side of the wrap. So I made 2 flags just like we did here at the end. This will hold the wire bundle flat. So as I'm wrapping it, it will hold the wires in place much easier than if I left it without those. Now this comes in handy. I actually still use this when I'm making a piece, say, that's this size, because this is about, I think it's each strand was about 11 or 12 inches long. And that causes the center of the wire to be a little weaker, and it makes it easier so these wires would bunch up, which is what we don't want. So by putting the tape on the outsides of these, this has worked for people that have had arthritis that we've had in class that were afraid they weren't going to be able to do this, and we made sure that they were able to. We just kind of worked out some of these. So here I'm setting it again. So now I've wrapped that entire center section. Now I've got all this excess wire. So now I'm going to cut it off. So notice I just put that curve in there. That's so I remember. I just ran it between my fingertips and put the curve in. So I remember that this is the inside of the wire. So I pull it up just slightly, and I'm going to cut it. Look how close I am. I'm cutting a tab here about, I'd say 2 millimeters maybe. I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to take this wire, I'm going to set it aside because you can use it later. So now I'm going to push this down, just flatten it. So now, if you could notice, I'm going to try and see how close I can get without it distorting the image. But this is covering about 1/2 to 3/4 is good for this little end piece. Now this end piece is actually going to be up against the stone, so you won't be able to see it from the outside. So here's the other side, so you can't tell that I cut it right here. So do the same thing with the other side. So we're going to lift this end up just slightly so we can get the tool under there, and we're going to cut it about that short. Be careful with your wire. Don't shoot it across the room or shoot it in your eye. So I got the little tab here. I'm going to push it down as well. So that's the first wrap that I've done on this piece. Now we're going to go ahead and do the outside ends right here and right here. To do that, you're going to do exactly the same thing. Now, I don't have quite enough wire, so I'm going to cut off another piece. I'm going to cut a little bit longer piece. We'll go over the steps again so you get it firmly in mind. We're going to hold it towards the end. I got the flat side facing me. Take the long end. I'm going to push it up over the tool so I make my check mark. Then I'm going to take it off of here, and I'm going to then wrap this one. I start with the inside. Now, on these outside wraps, these are going to be at the top. Let me show you which wraps I'm doing now on this piece. So I'm doing this wrap right here, this top one. And my wife only did, looks like 3 wraps. I'm actually going to do 6, maybe 7 on here. So, and on the outside wraps, we want this outside wrap and this outside wrap to be the same. So when you're wrapping the first one, count how many wraps you make so that you can duplicate that on the other side. So I'm going to hold it here with the tool. I'm going to take the long end and bring it up over the tool. And I'm going to start wrapping. Now on this particular wrap, these outside wraps, we don't really want to set them, but you do want to make kind of a firm wrap on this. But we aren't really going to set it because we're going to want these to move. Okay, so and you know what's funny is I didn't count. So now I'm going to have to show you what you don't do. So now you have to go back and you have to figure out how many you did. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's exactly what I wanted. So 7, and we're going to cut it off of here. And instead of let me put my curl in there so I don't forget. Push it down with my thumb and do the same thing on the other side. trim that end and push it down. So that's 2 wraps done. This is what it looks like from the outside. And now notice I can move this a little bit, and that's going to come in handy in the next step when we, or in a later step when we're going to center everything. So let's grab our wire one more time, and we're holding it from the end, making the check mark. And we're going to pick up our wire bundle, and we're going to make 7 wraps. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We end on the inside. So make sure that you end. Here's where I started. This is facing me. This is facing me as well. And now notice also that I may have marked this a little bit further, but I didn't wrap all the way to there. That's perfectly fine. Those are just a guide to remember where we're going to be doing this. We're going to center everything in just a minute. Let me put my curve back in my wire. And cut that one off. Now, if you're using sterling silver or any other precious metal like gold, gold-filled, silver-filled, argentium, save the scraps. I got my scraps over here. Save those. If you don't use them for another project or for the same project even, you can send them back to Rio. I send them to Rio Grande, and they recycle it, and I get a little bit off. I get a credit on my account. So now that we've got all 3 of these wire bundles done, I can take this tape off, and I won't have any problem. I can even take the end ones off with this wire causing any problems and coming loose. So notice it's still nice and firm here in the center. So there, now you've done your first 3 wraps. Now we need to make the shape around our stone. Let's do that. So now that we've got the wraps done, we need to shape the wire bundle around the stone so that it conforms to the stone like this. Okay? There's a couple ways you can do it. You can use a ring mandrel to do it, shape it around the ring mandrel. If I were to do that, I would do it so that I put it around the ring mandrel about the same size as this. It's not going to be perfect. You can make that adjustment. After all, we are using dead soft wire. Another way you can do it is use your finger. And you can put now notice I'm putting, this is the inside, so this is where I cut. Each of the wraps should have been cut on what I'm calling the inside now, because the inside is going to be up against the stone. So I would put the cut end around my finger, and then I would just push both ends around my finger. That will give me a nice horseshoe shape. A third way is to take the stone, and we're going to use our best friend again, the painter's tape, and we're going to cut another sliver. This time we're going to cut about half the width of what we use. So it's almost a ½ inch wide. Put the stone on our work surface in front of us, and take the tape and put it over it, and I want you to tape it to your work surface nice and flat. Now that gives your hands free to be able to take this, center the middle wrap at the tip of the stone, and bring each end around the stone. Now this comes in handy. Doing it this way comes in handy when you've got a stone like this that's got a nice point to it. See, having that point, taping it down and then conforming it to that point in this. So if you've got an odd shaped stone, that's the way to do it. Okay, so we've got both ends around our stone. So let me show you what we got here. So that's it. So now just take a look at it. I got a good horseshoe shape. It's pretty centered, I think. Pretty close to centered. But if you don't have it centered, let's say it's off just a little bit. This was not at the bottom. You can work it around by just grabbing it and twisting, or, bending the wire in that direction, and then check it again. Make sure it conforms, okay? And the other thing you want to do is once you get that, you want to kind of make sure that your two wraps here are kind of level. So if we put this on the stone, this is what we have. We've got a nice level piece on the stone. Okay, so let's now make it so that we can hold the stone inside of the wire bundle. And that's what we're going to do right now. So I've untaped my stone from my work surface, and I've got my wire bundle here. Now I need to determine which is going to be the front and which is going to be the back. Okay, now when you shape this around a stone, you're going to kind of get a natural curve in your wire bundle. You're not going to be able to really see it very well on camera, but if you were doing this live in front of you, you'd notice that this slants inward, and that's because we've conformed it around the shape of the stone. So that kind of tells me then that this higher side is going to be the back of the stone. So we want to now make this part here. This is going to hold the stone in, and we're going to make a bend right underneath each wrap here. So it's going to be either side of the middle and at the bottom of these outer wraps. Okay, so we're going to do the first one right here. So right here is where we're going to start. Now I can grab flat nose pliers. I can grab one of these right up against that wrap. See, right there. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to, oops, see, sometimes it doesn't work that way. I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But let's grab it, and all we're going to do is we're going to twist that to the center. So I'm doing this motion here. I'm twisting the pliers to the middle of the stone, or the middle of the bundle, rather, where the stone's going to sit. So if you have problems getting in there, take the paring knife and get in between. Be careful, but get that bottom strand and just kind of twist this just enough to separate it from the bundle. And that way it will allow you to then grab it. See how I've got it away from the bundle now? If I grab it and I twist this one to the center, and that's the other reason why we did not set these tops, because when you twist this, it's going to cause the ends of the wire to move inward. If you have these set too tightly right now, it would not allow you to twist this. Okay, so this is what we have. This is at the bottom of the stone, and we've got these two bends towards the center of the stone. So let's compare it to our example. So this is what we've done right there. Even on this one, this long one, same thing. I did the same thing. I just bent those in. On this particular one, it's slightly different because the wrap is off. But if you were to take and match the wraps up, so you notice there was a wrap or a bend at this end of the wrap and that end of the wrap to hold the back of the stone in. So this is the bottom. Let's do the same thing at the top. So we're going to grab this right here. Just notice where I'm at. I am at the bottom of this wrap. So here's my wire ends. These are the ends of the bundle. Here's the wrap. Here is below the wrap. So just bend it into the center. Oops. Slippery little guy, isn't it? And then we'll do the same thing over here. We will grab that bottom wire and we will twist it also to the center of the bundle. So now we have pretty much the same setup as we had on this one. Let me show you what happens now. So this is the front of the bundle. Here, the back is below here. So now I should be able to set it in there and it will hold my stone, the back of the stone in there without any problem at all. Now to do the front, you need to determine what you want to do. Now on the front of this one, she didn't do anything to this one. She just kind of pulled these over it just enough to hold that in. And that gives you a nice clean look on the front of the stone. On other pieces, you'll notice this one, there are bends over the stone, as well as this one. Now, this is a slightly different project. Doing this, I did it what I call freeform. And that's a little bit different than what we did here. But here on this side, this one right here, I'm going to determine where I want it. Now, for this particular one, we're just going to grab, and I usually grab it with my fingernail right here, right there above this. So remember in the back, we did it here up against, we did it on either side. We're going to do the similar here. So on one side of this bottom wrap, I'm going to grab it and I'm just going to push it up over the stone with my fingernail rather. And I'll do the same thing. I'll get my fingernail in there and I will push it up over the stone. So now the stone is held in place without any problem at all. But that's just one design. There's lots of places that you can bend this. You could put bends here at the top, and so that you've got it bend in and then goes up and then bends out. That's a great design. You can curve this a little bit. So if you bent it in here, if you bent it really super tight in at the bottom of each of these, that would give a nice design. But also notice one other thing. My wrap is off-centered. So let's fix that. So to fix that, see it's off-centered, we're going to take flat nose, and all I'm going to do is I'm just going to recenter that. And then I can take my stone and I can put it right back in, and that should have centered it on the stone again. So if I hold these together, that should have centered it. So think about what kind of design you want to push over the top of the stone in order to make it look how you want it. Okay, but you be careful not to put too much on top of the stone, because then it'll take away from the design. Because notice on this one, she put a lot of wire on it, but she still kept the design in the stone. Okay, on this Larimar that I did, see, I strategically moved the wires over this in order to show the stone off. I didn't put so much wire on there. And that's the beauty of this type of wrap. I like to have a nice balance between the stone and the wire. I don't want so much wire on here that it overpowers it. This makes a much more elegant piece. And the piece will look really good. A nice slimline look to it, very minimalistic as well. So that's kind of how I like to do mine, and I think it's a look that people are really wanting to get today. So now that I've got the design on the front of the stone how I want it, I'm just going to put something basic there. Let's now work on this top section. We'll do that right now. So now that we've got everything where we want it, we need to now kind of move our wires out just a little bit. So I'm going to kind of straighten these somewhat here, but we want to make sure that these kind of touch right in the center of the stone. Okay, these two top wraps. Now, if they do not meet up very well, like this right one, you'll notice doesn't quite reach that one. I'm going to pull it up just ever so slightly until I see that they kind of meet in the middle. So notice the tips of each of those wraps now meet right in the center of the stone. Once you've done that, once you've moved these wraps up and down the wire bundle to get them centered, you can now set them in place by squeezing the wire wrap. This will stop everything from this point on from moving. Okay, this will also straighten your wires up a little bit. So there. So I've got those. They meet in the middle. They're all set. To make our bail for this, take each of the bundles right here above that wrap, and I want you to bend it out like rabbit ears. So there's one, and there's the other one. Okay, so if you put it together like this, you got rabbit ears. So now take both of the rabbit ears, and I want you to push them together, and I want you to hold the rabbit ears together. See, so I've got both sides, and then we've got just a little bit of this tape left. I want you to tape those rabbit ears just above this. We're going to wrap in here. So this is about 3/4 of an inch right here. That's going to give you enough room to put this wrap. Oops, this is a slippery one too. But you see this wrap right in there. That's what we've got. So here's where we are. We've brought them together. Now she did this in a design to where there's a space here, a gap, and that's great to do. That's just fine. If that's a design you want to come up with, and we're looking at this from the back, that's fine to do it that way. But we're going to make this wrap right there in just a minute. So now we've done this by bringing the wires together, and we put this tape on there. The tape's holding it together. See, so now I can have the hands free to be able to make this wrap right here. So let's do that now. So in order to wrap the bail, we're going to need some more half-round wire, but this time we're going to need a lot more of it. So I would say cut off a good size piece, maybe 14 inches or so of this. You're going to have extra, but I'm cutting 14 inches-ish, and I kept it in its curve, remember. Now for this, since we're going to be going over a wider space, we're going to make a little bit wider of a check mark in this. To do that, hold it from the end a little bit further, so I'm not more like a little over an inch, but also notice I'm holding it deeper into the jaws of my flat nose pliers. That will make it so that when I bring this up over it, the check mark is much wider here. So hopefully you can see that, but notice how much wider this is. That will allow us to put this on the wire bundle to wrap it. So to wrap this, hold it with the top of the stone facing upward and put the check mark on the bundle, and I want you to put it up against or as close to the top of these top wraps that are on here that you can. And we're going to do this just like we always did the last couple of them. We're going to hold it with our pliers, bring the wire, the long end of the wire up. That makes our first one, and now we're going to count. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to make one more, 8. Now I ended my wrap on the same side that I started the wrap. So both of the ends, the small end as well as the large end. Before you go any further, do not cut anything. Don't cut any of your extra wire off. Set this by squeezing it, just like that. Okay, now I want you to take the tape off, because now we're going to make the bail. Take the tape off, and I want you to separate the wires from each side. So you should have 4, and you should have 4 on each side, split like that. If you have a hard time seeing which ones are getting, you can take the paring knife and you can kind of use the tip to separate them from each side. But this, spread them out in a V like this. So here's the front of my stone. My wires are facing the back of my the piece. I want you to take one wire, the front wire from the left, bring it back to the center. And I want you to take the front wire on the right, and I want you to bring that to the center. See, so now you've got 3 on this side, 3 on this side, and now look, you got 2 facing straight up the center. Why do I use the front ones? A lot of people use the back wires to make a bail. I use the front ones because from the profile of this, as we bend these backwards, it's going to start at the front of the stone and it's going to end on the back of the stone. It just looks better. It gives it a much more polished look. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these two front wires and we're going to bend them backwards, and we're going to bend them in between the long wire and the short wire. So it's going to go right there in between this V. Right in here. Let me see if I get right in here. Okay? There's a few ways that you can bend this to make the bail. I personally use my fingertip and I put it where I'm going to bend it. I use my thumb and I bend it over. Remember, we've got our handy dandy Sharpie. You can put the Sharpie in here and you can use the end of the Sharpie to bend this over in between there. Whatever way you want to use is fine with me. It's your piece, not mine. But I use my fingers, and I'll show you how I do that. So I hold it at the base of the V over my fingertips, and I just put a bend in it. That's all I did. So now from here, I can continue to push this, and I'm going to push it in between. So here's the small wire, here's my long wrap wire, and I'm going to push it down the center of the stone. So this is what it looks like. So let me hold it right side up so you can see. So this is what it looks like. This is going to be our bail. Then I'll wear this large wire, or rather where the short stubby wire is, just below it. If you just give this a push in like that, so you notice it's now up against the stone, that will help make the bail that much easier. So then to give the rest of the bail its shape, just kind of, I'm off camera, but let's kind of use flat nose and just shape that up. So this is what we've got. So now we can move these down a little bit into a T. So now I've moved those into a T shaped. We're going to use some of these wires. So now that we've got our long wire at the top, we've got our bail wires down the center in between the short stubby piece and the long piece, we're going to incorporate these bail wires into the bail wrap. I do this to keep everything down, to make a stronger bail so that it's easier for you to it gives you a little bit more stability in the piece, but it also gives the customer the assurance that this piece isn't going to fall apart 10 minutes after they walk away. See, this bail can really hold on. Even if somebody were to grab it and pull on the stone, it's probably going to choke them to death before this bail comes out. I don't recommend that, but this is going to give them a strong bail. So take your long wire, and I want you to start wrapping from the top down to the bottom. So we're going to overlap the wrap that we made going upwards. So you see what I'm doing here? See, I'm now adding this over my bail wires. And I do this until the long wire and the short wire meet. So now the long wire and the short wire are right next to each other. I've got a double wrap here. I always set this to get it nice and even and straight. Got a little bit of a problem in there. I must not have been paying very close attention, but we can fix that a little bit there. So now that you've got both of these wires next to each other, I want you to take and I want you to twist the two of them together, just like you would on a bread tie. Now, you ladies know what I'm saying. It's that thing on the bread that men always forget to twist when they're done making a sandwich. That's what I want you to do. I want you to twist these guys together to form about 1/4 of an inch pigtail almost. So here we go. There. So I've twisted these two wires together, and now I'm going to cut them towards that last twist. So now I've got this little stubby end here. Now if your stubby end is too long, you can always trim it shorter. This one's just a little tiny bit too long, so I'm just going to cut about 1 millimeter off. Using flat nose pliers, I want you to grab that little pigtail and I want you to push it upwards against your bail wrap. See, so it's hard to see, but this little guy is right there up against the bail wrap. Okay, now this is scratchy. This is going to irritate somebody. So that's where the next step comes in. So let's move on to making this safe for the person that's going to wear it. We'll do that right now. So we've got this little pigtail bent up against this wrap wire. Now the reason why I had you add an extra 2 inches to the bail is so that we can use this wire here that's coming down the bottom center to cover our little pigtail. So I want you to grab those 2 wires towards the bottom, and we're going to bend them up toward the top of the bail, so covering up our little pigtail here. Okay, so then at about the spot at the top of this wrap here on the top, take that bit of wire, this from here upward, and bend it down towards the bottom of the stone, making a hook. Let me show you what I mean. So we bent it up. That's this back part up against the pigtail. Then we took everything and we bent it downward. That will cover up the pigtail and make it so that it doesn't scratch someone. But now what are we going to do with these? Well, we're going to trim these off. So get your wire cutters, and I'm going to trim these somewhere around, say, 3 millimeters below where it bends. I'm going to trim both those wires off. So now we have this little hook right here. Okay, so that doesn't scratch anybody, I want you to take your flat nose pliers, and all I want you to do is I want you to bend those wires into the loop. So I'll show you what I mean. If I can get my pliers onto it. There we go. Now I call this, when I first wrote my first book, Wirewrapping the Basics and Beyond, I called this the Macintosh hook because nobody else was doing this. Everybody was tucking these in wherever they could, and it wasn't giving you a very strong bail. So that's what I have. So notice this hook. Now, if this is still scratchy, you can take a small needle file, and you can file that smooth. So that's how we're going to protect the back of this. So here's what we've got. Now we've got to figure out what to do with these out here. And we're going to use these to decorate the front of the piece. Okay, so we've got our bail nice and done. And notice, I mean, this is really, if you hold the stone and you grab the top here, this is not coming loose. You can pull and pull and pull, and this will not pull that loose. That's going to guarantee it's a nice strong piece for the wearer. And you can also take the bail and you can separate these wires out if you want. You can leave them straight up. You can put a bend in them as well. Let me show you how to do that. If you just grab the top of it, you just give it a little bend. That will make it so that it's got a nice decorative bail on it. Okay, so now let me show you what you can do with these wires. So now we're going to add some decoration to the top of this. And this does 2 things. First of all, it gives it a nice style to the piece, gives it a little character, but it also helps cover up this wrap to give you a much cleaner look. Okay, so I'll show you a couple of examples. Like in this particular one, I took the wires and I made it into this nice little swirl here. Nice, elegant, ribbon-like swirl. My wife, Kim, when she made this piece, she made a nice heart shape and gave it a little twist here. See, that's something you can do with that. And then on this one, she's the one that made this orthoceras also, and she did something similar to what I did. She just kind of bent these in and made a nice design. This is going to catch people's eye. It's subtle, the design is, but it adds the elegance that you want in the piece, and it shows it off really well. So let's do that now. We're going to use our fingers. Now, this is the part where you need to decide what you want it to look like. This is your artwork. This is your piece. So come up with your own look. I'll show you how to make these swirls. Now, on here, I don't usually keep these 3 wires here. I usually pull one off, and I usually grab this back one. And if you take the piece and you hold it at an angle like this, and you grab this and you start to bend it back and forth like this, working it against the bale wrap, you keep going and going and going, and it will come right off. That's another thing you can do. You can take all of these off and not have anything on the front. But I like to take the back ones off because I usually only like 2 strands of wire here to make curves and curls with. So I'm going to do the same thing here with the other side. I'm pulling this back one off. I got it at a slight angle here. There, pulled it right off. So now I only have 2 wires here. So I always start with, it doesn't make any difference. I personally start on the left side. For some bizarre reason, my swirls and everything usually go this way. So I take it and I use the curve of my finger to do this. So I'm going to hold it where I want the curve. And I'm going to take my thumb and my middle finger, and I'm going to hold the wire, and I'm going to twist the wire, and I'm going to twist with my left hand the main part of the piece so that it makes a curl. So here we go, and I'm just adjusting where I want the curl. So now we've got that. And then if I take it and I center this, okay, I'm going to want to bring this down just a little bit. There we go. So that's one. Now, this one, I can do the same thing, but I can go this way. I kind of like going the opposite way. So I like to do an inside curl over the bale. So I'll use my thumb this time and hold it with my thumb and finger, and I will start it on the curve, and then I'm going to bring it this way so that I get this. Now I'm going to want to kind of bury this in the middle of that curl. So let's cut this excess wire off, and we're going to bury the tips of that curve inside of that bigger curl that I made, the first one I made. And now we're going to flatten everything down a little bit. So we're going to smush it together. See, so that's what I got. This going in the middle of that curve, and that's going to hold, it's going to hide the end of that so it doesn't hurt anybody. And let's straighten my curl up just a touch. Going to see, now this is where chain nose will come in handy to be able to get in and do some of these finer tuning parts. So we're going to grab this wire that's sticking out a little bit, and we're going to fix that. So that fixed my curve. And let's trim these wire ends in there inside of the curl. And then we will push everything down and together. There. See, so now it gives a nice, elegant, slow-moving curl and a design to this. But whatever you want to come up with is fine with me. It's your work, not mine. And kind of play with it. But also what you also want to do is you want to do some housekeeping as well. Look at the front of the stone. And this is the time now you want to make some adjustments to your design. Now I want these to have a much lower bend. I want to take this bend and I want to make it lower. All right, so I kind of squeeze it with my flat nose, so that takes the bend out. And then I put the bend back in where I want it. So I want it a little bit lower. So I then, so now look how much lower it is. And I'll do the same thing with the other side. I will take that out and put it back in. See, now to me that looks better. I like that much better. So that's all to it. That's how you make this piece. You can make this piece here using the same instructions that we made this piece here. The principles are all the same. The stone is exactly the same, or the wrap is exactly the same. I made a much larger bale in this one, but I like to put a big bale in these as well. so that they'll fit anything. But the mechanics of it are all pretty similar in both stones. So that's it. That's all you need to do. So that was pretty simple, wasn't it? It's not a very difficult piece, and some of those ways that I change things up and how I add tape in order to hold the bundle together and some of the other things that I do are just things that I've learned over the years to make a better piece, but to also make a secure piece and to make it easier when I'm working on it. I always think about having an 11-inch strands of wire and how the wires are all over the place. They're everywhere. But by using tape to hold the sections together, it gives me a much easier workplace, and I don't start throwing tools around my studio and getting angry. And hopefully that helps you too. So hopefully all of these little tips and making this piece is worked out really well for you. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please do me a couple of things. Leave your comments below. Let me know what you thought about the project. Let me know if you got any tips. That would be great too. If you've got any tips that others can use to make this job a whole lot easier too, that would be great. Let me know. Also, give me a like. And also, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Hit the bell so that you get notifications of my next tutorial that I'm doing. I plan on making these about once a week. Usually try to get them out on Thursday or Friday. So check back periodically, and also make sure you check out the links in the description of this video. So this is Jim McIntosh, and I want you to remember, practice, practice, practice.